The views expressed in this video are solely those of the host and the guests and do not necessarily reflect the views of any organization or entity that may be affiliated with. We encourage the viewer to conduct their own research.
Hi there, and welcome to another episode of The Pack Breakers, a show dedicated to tobacco harm reduction and the people of tobacco harm reduction. So today we're going to do something a little different. We're going to be looking at Vaping 101. And to help me with this is a very, very important guest, somebody that's not foreign to The Pack Breakers, and that is Craig Pietersen.
Hi, Craig. Yes, you got my name right. That's
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Excellent.
We're friends after all, isn't it?
Yeah. Craig, I think, we were toying with this idea that, we have all these scientists and policy experts and people that have been involved in the game for a very long period of time. And I thought maybe we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, or we're talking above people that really want to know about vaping. So I think this idea is going to really pan out to help individuals out there who want to know a bit more about the actual devices and about vaping itself, as well as maybe there's a person who smokes out there that's sitting on the fence and is too shy to ask, or maybe even there's individuals out there that have got the wrong advice. And I think that's important, and to just walk us through all the different devices, and then maybe even touch on what are the most common things that happen when somebody, a newbie as we call them, or a person that is wanting to switch to vaping or tobacco harm reduction. What are the things that they ask, and what are the reservations that they have around this particular technology? So thank you very much for putting on a smorgasbord of vapes over here, and let's get into it.
Right, yes, good. You all know vaping is a multifaceted sort of an industry that offers a really wide variety of different tools to help a person quit smoking. Because fundamentally, that is what vapes are for. They're for smokers, no one else. So we can get stuck right in. So let's, as you say, go from a newbie's perspective. They want, in their heads, they want something that's going to replicate that cigarette.
Yes.
Okay, now there's a few ways to go about that. Something like this particular device, this, and this would probably be your first steps into reducing the harm that combustible tobacco causes. But you may not understand how these things work, and that's why vape shops are so important compared to a cigarette counter or anywhere else. It's because the people are supposed to be generally quite knowledgeable about these products. Luckily for you, I am.
Well, we came here, didn't we?
So I've been selling them for 10 years.
So what we have here is basically pod devices, correct? Yes. Refillable pod devices.
Yes.
So what does that really mean?
Yeah, open pod or refillable pod devices come with a replaceable pod. That is the replaceable pod. You have different resistances. I'm pretty sure the camera can't see it, but you have different resistances which in turn lead to larger or smaller cloud production used for higher or lower nicotine products. We would basically start with questions, a bunch of questions to a new user. What brand of cigarette do you smoke? How many do you smoke a day? Fridays and weekends don't count, because as we all of us smokers and ex-smokers know, you can be, let's say, a pack a day sort of a guy or girl, and come weekend, you can potentially become a two-pack, three-pack a day sort of a person. So we would first try to establish what sort of nicotine strength to advise to our customers. For us as Vapers Corner, and I'll speak just for Equestria in this particular, although all Vapers Corners would be kind of the same, we would, but almost never, suggest super high levels of nicotine, as I personally don't see the purpose of it, apart from addicting someone even more.
Okay.
So we would commonly advise a 1.2 ohm pod for this device or this device. This one only has a 1.2 ohm.
So the 1.2 ohm is the actual coil resistance.
That's the coil resistance of the little silver bit inside of the pod. That is going to determine how much power the device is going to be using and how big or small of a cloud and how restrictive that cloud, therefore more like a cigarette. A cigarette is restrictive by nature.
So the combination is the resistance, the amount of airflow, it will replicate the experience of a cigarette.
Yeah, coupled with the right nicotine, yes.
Yes, and then that would be what we would term almost a mouth to lung scenario.
Yes, because
typically how people smoke is they
the,
inhale into their mouth and then into their lungs and then exhale.
just like that, yeah, the cigarette-ish.
Yes.
I would commonly use the word. It's more cigarette-y.
Yeah.
So the lower the number of the resistance, the less cigarette-y it becomes.
Okay.
And then we would kind of go from our little bottles into our bigger bottles, which are low nicotine, 0 milligram, up to 6 milligram at its strongest.
That's the biggest bottles.
That's the big bottles.
The smaller bottles?
Smaller bottles, they range from 12 milligrams up to, it pains me to say it, 50 milligrams, which is a necessity, unfortunately, caused by another newer vaping device to our industry.
And that is
The
disposable
disposable.
vapes. So, I mean, I think you know as well as, I've shared my thoughts. I have a love-hate relationship with disposables. I do think they serve a purpose, is that they are convenient for people. They do, unfortunately, some of them do come with very high levels of nicotine. But that can be important for a person that doesn't want to now invest heavily into a whole device going through that massive learning curve. They just wanted to give it a try. And they are proving to be, at least from my understanding from counterparts around the world, they are proving to be successful in helping people quit smoking. But the idea around it is to then migrate over to something like that.
Yes. It's also the most expensive, in the long run, the most expensive way you can vape.
Okay. But I mean, they do serve a purpose, but that's not something that you want to do for a very long period of time,
No,
correct?
often customers will eventually go, this is really expensive.
Yeah.
Working me out a lot of money. More than smoking sometimes, they might even say.
Okay.
Because they possibly weren't helped. Here with us in Vapers Corner, it is legitimately fundamentally different.
Okay.
It is almost the last thing I'm going to suggest. If you want to go out and not have your device stolen potentially, a disposable might be the way to go, but we do offer lower nicotine strengths as well, which is the thing we would, in that specific case, offer.
So I'll give you a very good real life example, is that my cousin, who smoked for many, many decades, and I kept giving her these. I kept providing her with these different liquids, different flavors, so forth and so on. But it was the disposable that helped her quit smoking. But ironically enough, she's now moved over to those. And that's the plan. And that was an organic thing. That wasn't just purely because it was forced her. She found a way of quitting through the disposables, but then eventually moved over to that. And that's what she's now on, these open pods. Okay, so what's the next progression?
Okay, so the next would
or
be
choice?
Something like this potentially, or if you want to make some really big clouds, something like this. Yeah, these are what they would call pod mods. So it's a battery, very much like a pod system, but This has a replaceable coil. There it is. It is easily replaced by pulling it out of the jobby like so, out of the tank. The tank is refillable, obviously. And put that in there. It's got its own USB power supply.
And a built-in battery.
And a built-in battery.
Built-in battery.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we haven't quite just yet moved into the replaceable battery part. So the downside with this and the problem we see on a weekly basis is, especially for customers coming to our store from another store, and they go, do you perhaps know why my device is not working? Well, first question we ask is, how are you charging it? I know, just with my cell phone block. Right, there's your problem. Because cell phone power blocks are meant for cell phones and literally nothing else.
Okay.
These batteries are not cell phone batteries. These batteries can handle no more really than 2 amps of current.
Okay.
Once you give them higher than 2 amps current, you are damaging that battery. If the current is high, or if the charge is prolonged, the lifetime of charging is prolonged, you can damage the board inside of it as well, costing you money. Now, this is a piece of education that is sadly lacking in the industry.
Yes.
Because people aren't being made aware of how you can charge it. Now,
But this is all the kind of pearls of wisdom that you provide a new customer or person that's buying.
all of this is in the whole spiel that we would say to a new customer. I know it, my staff know it, they know it down pat.
Okay.
It is driven into their minds because it is so important that when a customer says, no one told me about it, then I can just go, because the customer is only ever right in matters of taste.
So Craig, which button do I push here to make the device explode?
That'll be, you hold all the buttons together,
Okay.
spin around 3 times,
Okay.
and then magically it'll just take 5.
And that was a bit of a silly joke, but the reality is that all of these devices that we see in front of you has some level of protection, and that protection enables us to prevent those kind of mishaps. You know, exploding batteries is something that happens in another form of vaping that we probably might touch on, but
We have to.
Yeah.
I'd say we have to.
but the reality is it doesn't really happen. So, okay, so that device, and then obviously there's the bigger device.
Just quickly touching on this, these have what they call, oh no, the name is just dropped
Pod
out
mod.
of my- No, the type of charging. It stops charging basically. I forget the term right now, but it stops charging. Overcharge protection. Thank you.
There we go.
Good, got it. So when it's full, it stops charging. So you cannot necessarily overcharge. But if you're already, back to the thing I said, if you're already using the wrong power source, you're kind of damaging that battery from the first charge.
Okay.
And you will see that manifest as just the battery will not last as long as it used
But
to,
all of that information is also in the leaflets.
which people never read.
Exactly.
People never read anything. Right, so then this sort of a device is something I would say for an existing vapor, really. Or perhaps someone who wants low nicotine, although there are ways around that with a more cigarette-y feeling sort of a thing. But this is what you would call a modern tank. This is actually a sub-ohm tank, specifically. Now, a sub-ohm tank, what that basically means is it uses more power than a pod system and chucks a cloud, very large cloud, depending on how low your resistance is. Because that's, as I did touch on it earlier, but the lower the number of the resistance, the more power is required to vaporize effectively.
Yes.
If you can do it wrong and it's going to spit at you, it's going to start leaking potentially even, or even prematurely burn out. And with something like this, you would buy a replaceable pod, rather a coil, sorry. I just want to see, of course there won't be a loose one lying around. Look in that orange box.
This one over here.
No, the orange, that's a black box.
Yeah, okay.
Right, this is a blister pack sub-ohm coil head. Some guys, the Americans really call it coil heads. A coil is the most common way we would refer to these things. This comes out of a blister pack. It is mass produced. Every so often you're going to get a
dud.
A dud. I was going to say something a little bit less eloquent. But yeah, you're going to get a dud. That is the unfortunate thing about mass production, is you can't really control much about this thing. You can try your best. We would advise to a new customer that they need to prime their coil. Now what priming means is you take your e-liquid of choice and you would take it and put drops on everywhere where you can see the exposed cotton and saturate this coil prior to using it. Then you pop it in, then you fill the tank, then and all of these coils have a recommended wattage range. For this one, for example, is between 50 and 60 watts.
And it says that on the coil itself.
It says it on the coil itself, if your eyes are good enough to read it. Mine are, that one I can still read, but some of them are nigh impossible for my old eyes to see.
I think if we have a coil from one of those devices,
well, that's the size of it.
you can just basically see that this is, something that creates those big, massive clouds that everybody talks about, huge clouds, smaller clouds. Pretty much works the same way.
Exactly the same way.
Cotton wrapped around a metal element. Liquid goes into the cotton, it comes in contact with the metal element. When you push the power, the element heats up, and then the introduction of air, and the combination of that creates the aerosol that we see. Obviously, that chimney is going to make a bigger smoke than this little one.
Tiny chimney
Yeah.
there. A vape is basically a little kettle that boils very quickly and in a very controlled fashion. Right, okay, so we're at
Sub-ohms.
sub-ohms. So as you saw, I was able to remove this tank off of this device.
Yes.
This is the tank. This is what is referred to as a mod. A modular device, singular modular device. There to show. This takes batteries. Now here's where the danger can come, is by improper use of said batteries. It's a violent action when one of these batteries gets mistreated or has to go or explode or thermal runaway, whichever you want to, whichever word you want to use to
But they just
describe.
don't do it spontaneously. There has to be some kind of damage done to the battery.
Most often, if someone can just pass me a battery quickly, I just want to show why it's dangerous. Wind your phone back. Okay. This is a Vaping 18650 battery. 18 millimeters, 650 millimeters. That's why it's called an 18650. This is the most common battery used in vapes, mods anyways. You get a bigger one called a 21700 or a 2700, and there have been others in the past, but these are the most common ones that are being used now. You will see on the top of the battery a little ring, a little silver ring. That is your positive terminal. You will see inside of your mod a positive and negative symbol to indicate which way the battery must be orientated. Everything else about this battery, only this circle rather, is positively charged. It has a positive charge on it. The rest of this battery is negatively charged. Even the sides, even that gap between where the positive circle is and the edge of the battery is, that's a negative charge. So that's why it's insulated or isolated even, so that only a thing can touch there. But if you were to throw this battery into your pocket
With keys.
with a set of keys or some loose change and a piece of metal touches there and there, it's going to short.
Yeah.
And how long it touches will kind of determine how bad your day is going to be.
Yeah.
It could be, the battery's getting a bit warm.
Good enough.
Oh, I'm going to the hospital with third-degree burns.
Yes. But again, it's about an actual act. It's not.
Yeah, they don't just spontaneously decide.
The other interesting thing is that 18650s are commonly used in a whole host of other devices, namely torches, namely
Radios.
power drills, those, what are those portable power tools.
Older electric vehicles, I believe.
So even some EVs, electric vehicles like Teslas, use an 18650 packs, massive packs, banks of these things. So they are relatively safe if they are treated correctly. And I think battery safety is key, and those kind of lessons are what get taught in a vape shop like Vaper's Corner.
Yeah, because we don't want our customers exploding themselves.
And these devices obviously have the same level of protection that we see with other devices. You shouldn't charge your batteries in this device. When you have something that has two batteries in it, it's always advisable to get an external battery charger. Do not charge it on the device itself. It's just, good advice.
Yeah,
can do it, but you shouldn't really do it.
You could, like in an emergency, in a pinch, if you needed to do so, fine, do so. But do not use a USB as your sole form of charging, especially in devices that take more than one. The load to the cells is not equal. And over time, these batteries can actually develop an imbalance. Because we like to say, if you use a device like this, your batteries have to be married. So you buy a set of batteries, you always use them together, maybe have another set that you can alternate with. While one is on charge, one is being used. Quick alternation, don't use new batteries with old batteries. Always make sure that your wrap is beautifully sitting everywhere, covering all the places it's supposed to cover. And should it start tearing, because that happens, some of the battery bays are quite tight. And as you're removing batteries over time, you can start scarring the battery, the wrapping itself. But a good vape shop will have spare wraps for you.
Yeah.
Battery wraps nowadays are quite pretty. This is a very boring one. But you do get other brands of battery wraps that can beautify your little battery for you.
So one of the things that we need to touch on here is that with these different mods, something that a lot of people don't understand is that not only can you adjust the strength and the size of your vape cloud production, is that you have the coils, but also these devices you can regulate the wattage or voltage, which is then corresponding to whatever the coil is.
Yeah.
So these are even more customizable with regards to different types of coils, different wattage settings. This is obviously a monster of a device.
It is a monster. It is. This one takes the 21700 batteries I mentioned earlier,
Which is effectively,
but also has these jobbies that you can slide your 18C. So you don't necessarily have to buy the bigger batteries. You can just use your existing batteries in this device with zero problem.
but I think the important take home here is that they are completely adjustable and with settings with regards to your entire vape experience. And now you compare it with any number of tanks.
Yeah.
And now we're getting into the world of hobbyists, would you say?
Yes, definitely to a degree. This one more for this one is much like the Sub-ohm or the sub-tank in that it still takes a coil, but those coils for this particular tank, they're cigarette-y. Okay. So
mouth to lung.
Mouth to lung, yes. They're mouth to lung. Why you would use something like this instead of something like that is this just holds more e-liquid.
Yes.
Simply put, it's still the same sort of action.
Same experience.
Same experience. You have airflow that you can open and close to your liking. But yes, then you get here.
Now this is when we get into some serious stuff.
And in my opinion, still the best form of vaping. So with all of these things, price is obviously to the customer a big deal. And something like this and this with the charger and the coils and the cotton and all the things, this is going to cost you the most to set up, but also going to save you the most money in the long run to maintain. Whereas something like this, a pod like this can cost, depending on where you buy it, anywhere between 60 and 100 rand.
Yeah.
And it has a finite life. On average, 10 days to 2 weeks. If you're going to vape like a smokestack, less.
Yeah.
And this is all of these things are explained when the customer is here looking to buy and to get set up, we would say. So this is a rebuildable. Now this is where in my opinion, the meat and potatoes of vaping lies. The best sort of experience, the most tailorable to the individual you're going to be able to do on this level. Okay, so this is what they refer to as the building deck. It has some screws that hold in wire coils. Kurt, if you could just reach down and grab the closest set of coils there. Thank you, sir. And these are the coils. I don't know if the camera can see them, but this is a set of coils. This is what they call a Clapton, which I remember when Claptons became a thing, we all lost our bloody minds. But yeah, it is a core wire or core wires of a certain thickness wrapped in a thinner wire.
I think it comes from the term Eric Clapton.
Yes, as in guitar string.
Guitar string.
Clapton,
yeah. So yes, and those come in different sizes, different resistance.
Yeah. Different materials.
Different metals out there. Some metals are made for temperature control, and some metals are just purely wattage. But again, that all depends on the choice.
Yeah. So with this one, you would trim it down. You'd use a nice little entry-level toolkit such as this. You would trim these. There are guides in the box to tell you exactly how long they need to be. You'd unscrew these little post screws. You'd mount your coil accordingly, put it on your device, and then comes the balancing of the coils. Okay. Before you put this, you balance the coil, so you reduce your wattage to, let's say, a third of whatever wattage you're accustomed to vaping on. You reduce to about a third of that, because the temperatures generated when you are dry burning coils is much, much greater than when there's a wet piece of cotton inside there.
Obvious, yeah.
So you would do that, and you try and doing that, it takes a bit of learning.
But that's something that you would do.
That is something we provide.
Yeah.
We do the building outright, but I really do try my damnedest to get people to do it for themselves. I don't mind doing it, and our policy here is if you bring your own cotton or you support the store, it's called wicking, I'll wick for you for free. You come with nothing, I'm going to sell you a specific little piece of cotton in a little kit with 2 pieces of cotton, a really crappy tweezer, and a really crappy scissor. But it's serviceable, it will do the job, yeah? I'll sell you that for 20 Rand. So basically it's going to cost you 20 Rand if you come with nothing.
Yeah.
And that's where, like I said, this is where the fun lies. Because you can have a device like mine, which is a mouth-to-lung device, a cigarette-esque device, or something like this. So basically you have, vapes are either like cigarettes, or they're like Hubblies in terms of the cloud production, or they're somewhere in between.
And I think that's where it becomes really important. And the reason why it's such a successful method is because you literally have a whole host of different devices and ways of customizing your experience to achieve the ultimate goal of being able to quit smoking. Obviously, when we start talking about these bigger devices, now you're going into more of a hobbyist kind of scenario. Now it becomes more of a thing of experimenting with different tanks, different devices, different flavors, so forth and so on. But it's not typically where the average person would start off with.
No. If you put
Well,
one of
in
these
saying
things-
that, we all started with something very similar to this back in the day because we didn't have the technology.
didn't have these small things.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I started with mine looked like a cigarette. My first thing actually looked like a cigarette.
Yes. Yeah.
Had a white battery with a green light in the front, and the filter part was your little tank. It worked to get me not to smoke anymore, but it was crazy expensive. And not something that is really able to keep it up. You can't really keep it up. You've got to kind of change. And that's why, luckily, at the time, we had the older school things that most of us just
Cut our
jumped
teeth
into.
on, yeah.
That's why we cut our teeth. That's how I can say I'm really good at wicking a tank,
Yes.
because my hands have just done it. And I always explain it to my customers who are potentially curious. I always compare it to driving. When you start driving, you're bad. You don't know what you're doing. Just like when you start wicking, eventually, over time, you are not even thinking anymore about mirror, blind spot, indicator,
It still comes naturally.
10-2. You are just doing it. So, and eventually, wicking will get there as well. The more you do it, and potentially the more mistakes you make, the more you learn. If you do it in a controlled environment like our store, we are able to guide you every single step of the way and tell you how, because you can do it wrong. It's easy to do it wrong, especially if you don't know. Yes, there's videos out there that you can check, but rather speak to a human being and get that immediate feedback. Because you can cut your cotton too long. I'll show you this particular cotton is one of our favorites because it is a 3-meter long string of exactly the right size of cotton to fit inside of these coils. So there's a lot less. I mean, and you well know, Kurt, in the past, we didn't have things like this. We
had big sheets of cotton that we had to strip and stretch out and then roll back in.
It was a mission.
It was a mission. But I think one of the most important lessons that we need to touch on here is the use of certain nicotines inappropriately in certain devices.
Yes.
So we have for lack of a better word, we have two kinds of nicotines: nicotine salts and Freebase nicotine. Freebase nicotine is typically the old form or old school of nicotine, how it's manufactured and so forth. We're not going to go into that detail. Nicotine is something, nic salts or nicotine salts is something new, and that has literally an innovation that's paired with the smaller devices over here and over there.
I'd say probably chiefly here.
Yes.
And then can be applied to most of these
devices. And it's not necessarily the nicotine salt itself, it's the strength that nicotine salts typically come in. So very seldom do we see nicotine salts that are manufacturing 3 milligram or 0.3%. We usually see nicotine salts in the 2, 3, 5%, which translates to 20 milligrams, 30 milligrams, 50 milligrams. That's all good and well and fine if it's paired with the correct device.
Yes.
However, applying those kind of nicotines in a device like this with coils that Craig has just demonstrated, even this coil over here, is problematic. Why is that, Craig?
Well, because when you heat nic salts too hot, they actually become carcinogenic. Sub-ohm, when you go sub-ohm with nicotine salts, in fact, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure the only actual resistance for safe usage of nic salts is 1.2 ohm.
Correct.
Nothing else. Not
In
even
fact,
1 ohm.
the general rule of thumb is anything higher than 1 ohm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Higher than 1 ohm, and you are safer. 1.2 ohm, safest.
And it's about the heat.
Yes.
It's purely about the heat. And when you start talking about these kind of coils, they typically generate a lot more heat than a smaller coil over there. And therefore, those devices are more designed for nicotine salts, whereas these devices are for free-based nicotines.
I also just want to quickly discuss percentage. It's a very troubling measure of nicotine,
Yes.
in my opinion. It's very confusing to the layperson. The layperson sees 5% nicotine, and most people are going to equate that with alcohol, let's say.
Yes.
Because 5% alcohol is very little. But that's not how we measure
No.
nicotine now, is it? It's milligrams. So if you don't yet know, 5% is 50 milligram. 50 milligram is insanely strong. I've seen some studies that say your body can only absorb 36 milligrams anyway. So why it exists is entirely beyond me, apart from to addict.
Well, yeah, I mean, we'll see other parts of the world that have actually reduced the nicotine strength. So if you have, for example, Europe has TPD, where they've introduced a restriction on the nicotine strength, but they've also introduced the size of the tank. And they've also, part of their regulations is the liquids that are provided in Europe have to go through a certain level of reporting in terms of the testing that. But yes, I do agree that if we look at, for example, the SABS standards that have just been approved in South Africa, there's a nicotine limit there that's been suggested. And that is at 35 milligrams, irrespective of whether it's a nicotine salt or Freebase. So
Freebase ain't gonna
I
taste
think the
very
number
good.
one lesson that we want to point over, is that if you are looking at using a 2%, 20 milligram, 3%, 30 milligram, or even a 50%, 50 milligram, 5%, always use it on a device over there, one of these, passed it over here, one of these refillable pods that has a resistance of 1 or more ohms. That's the safest way to do it. And it's probably the most efficient way of vaping currently.
I'll use myself as the example. My body doesn't seem to want to be able to metabolize nic salts. So I get actually quite sick. I get headaches, heart palpitations, nausea, any touch of anxiety. It's just too strong for me. You feel it here. Whereas your Freebase nicotine, depending on the strength, you feel more here. And which is why I'm, for a smoker, 12 milligram. That is going to check a box of I'm smoking something.
Yes.
It's going to check that box. It's going to give you potentially satisfaction that a 20, 30, 40, 50 milligram doesn't really give you physically, apart from a head rush.
Yeah.
And you're an ex-smoker, you know well, you have a cigarette, you go into a meeting for 4 hours, you have another one, you feel that head rush. And that's the most of the feedback I get from customers, is they get a head rush. I personally don't see why that's lacquer,
Yeah.
but to each his own.
No, absolutely.
To each his own.
So we hope that we touched on all the good points over here around what the different devices are and how they fit together and so forth. But let's touch on, let's say, for example, someone walks through the door now, has been smoking for some period of time and wants to get into vaping. And you go through this whole presentation, do the questions, do some kind of discovery as to which is the best device and which is the best flavors and nicotine strength. But there's always going to be some of those questions of apprehension or what those customers have been exposed to.
Yes.
What is the most common one in this shop?
Popcorn lung.
Popcorn lung.
Water on the lungs.
So how much popcorn can we fit in one of these tanks?
Not very many. Well, popped or unpopped.
Yeah.
That's the first question you need to ask. You're going to get a lot more unpopped popcorn into that thing, but that's the only popcorn it's going to give you.
So that popcorn lung is still a very big
and
issue for people out there.
you've discussed this on Pack Breakers. We discuss it in the shop. We are all, for the most part, quite abreast on the propaganda out there. We have been, especially us people who have been in the industry for so much longer. We've seen it come, we've seen it go. It was, in fact, the thing that kind of drew me to vaping, because even back in, 2013 or so when I started, isn't that long ago? It's longer. Anyways, doesn't matter. Even then there was a little bit of research being done, and a lot of people say, "Oh no, it's super bad," and then a little bit more lesser known information, not as mainstream. It's like, no, it's not. It's actually the best way to get nicotine into your body without combusting tobacco. So that's what drew me.
So we do have a video on the pack breakers where I discuss popcorn lung and how there's a correlation to vaping and what this popcorn lung is. So please, if you're interested in what popcorn lung is and how it's associated to vaping, just look through our videos. You'll see an episode that discusses that. So what other issues that we hear about?
Moisture on the lungs.
Okay.
Those are probably the main things, or just the general understanding by the customer that, oh, this is as bad or even worse. You have to ask the question, why are you here then? If you know it's, in your head it's worse, why are you going to try this thing?
Yes.
Then you hear, that's why a testimonial is so important, especially by someone who has been doing it for a long time. Now, yes, there are no long-term studies. Long-term, 50 years and greater.
Well, the interesting thing about that, Craig, is that I was actually doing a bit of research. That 50-year research around smoking and so forth, if we think about when it was done in the 1950s, 60s. There was no email, there was no faxing or anything like that. So effectively what was happening, and I think I heard this story from somebody at the Royal College of Physicians, is that they would send out a letter to all the doctors in the UK to ask them to fill in a form and then send that all the way back to the Royal College.
Snail mail.
And then they would have to go through all these papers over and over again. And obviously it took a very long time to get to a point where we understand that combustion, smoking, causes lung cancer and causes all these other diseases. But in the 21st century, the year 2025, where by pricking your finger or even, licking a stick, we'll be able to tell you what disease you have.
What's wrong with you?
What's wrong with you. I think the long-term studies is always going to be there. If we look at, for example, HIV and AIDS and a whole host of other diseases, it doesn't stop us from studying. We should continually study. We should continue to understand this. But what the information that we currently do have is sufficiently enough to say that taking vaping and comparing it to combustible tobacco, just from an aerosol point of view, from the biomarkers of harm from your saliva, from your blood, from urine, so forth, are significantly different. And therefore, that is why places like the UK and a number of other places around the world have considered vaping to be significantly less harmful than smoking. So, is there anything you'd like to share with our audience around?
If you smoke, try to quit. It's hard for some, it's easier for others. But try and get the right thing. Try and speak to a knowledgeable person. You are not going to get a level of service outside of a vape shop anywhere. Come to a vape shop, speak to a person who has been doing it for some time, get their opinions. Do your own research. Go to VSML. There's a host of information at a click. It's easy to get. Make informed decisions. Do not necessarily take, for example, my opinion. I might know a lot, but I would want you, the smoker, to find out for yourself. Go check for yourself. Go hear from other human beings. Don't necessarily pay a lot of attention to what a doctor on Facebook says. They may not have all the information, or they might be getting some fundage on the side to promote a narrative. Speak to vapers.
Yeah.
Yes, there are doctors who vape. They're rare, but they're out there. Speak to them. As I said, just make informed decisions. Support vape shops. if anything.
Yes,
Not just mine, not just this one,
all of them.
all of them. If it's a brick and mortar vape shop, it's probably run by people who actually care.
Yeah.
You know, I care more about the safety of my customers than I do care about selling them something. I would easily spend an hour or more talking to a customer, having them go, make up their mind, and then come back, and then we can start the road to harm reduction. It's all about harm reduction at the end of the day. That's what this is. Us smokers who have used vaping to quit smoking, some of us have been doing it for more than a decade now, and most of these horror stories that you read online or hear on the radio, because that's a big thing now I see as well. It's to scare you. It's scaring off a lot of people who could be benefiting from these life-saving vaping products. It can prolong your life if you use these things instead of combustible tobacco. It's not safer to smoke. It's not better to just smoke. If your doctor says that to you, you need a new doctor. Any doctor who says smoking is better than vaping is talking out of an orifice that I shan't mention now. That's and try to avoid these. Maybe under certain circumstances, these are okay. But try to avoid them. And this is coming from a vape shop that sells them. I use them mainly, yes, to give to the crackheads who don't want to listen. But the people, for the most part, people do want to listen, and people are, invested in their own health. And I use them to get them to use this instead. I draw them in. That's why I put it all the way over there. If you can't, maybe you don't get how our shop works on camera, but these disposables are the furthest point away from the front door. And you could always tell a disposable customer when they walk in the door, because they're like this. Where's the dispose? Where's the dispose? No, they're there. You're going to have to walk all the way past all the other stuff to see that.
I think you made it pretty clear you don't like disposables.
I don't. I really don't, dude. I hate them on a molecular level.
I think, we've had a lot to say about that. And Craig, I think, thank you very much again for coming onto the Backbreakers and providing some insights into all the different devices. I hope our audience have learned something here, especially the people that are inquisitive or curious about these. I have to second Craig. If you really want good advice, go to a good, reputable vape shop. Spend some time with the people behind the counter, because 99.9% of the time, they've gone through the journey, they've heard all the questions, they've seen all the situations, and it's always good advice to go to an expert in the field. So thank you very much. I hope you did learn something, and thank you very much, Craig.
Thank you, Sausage.
Thank you for watching another episode of the Packbreakers. If you enjoyed our content and learned something, give us a like and subscribe to the channel. You can follow Packbreakers on Rumble, YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcast. You can also follow us on all our socials on Facebook and Instagram, VSML_SA. But all our information is saved neatly and concisely on our website, vsml.co.za. Thank you.